you recording? Fantastic. All right, thank you everybody for coming tonight. This is the Early Childhood Education webinar series sponsored by Rasmussen University. So let's go ahead and jump in and get started. Rasmussen University has early childhood education degrees that go from a certificate all the way up to a bachelor completer opportunity. So if you are looking to improve your education, to potentially look for that promotion, potentially get an increase in responsibilities or an increase in pay perhaps, or even try something new within the early childhood education field, getting your education is usually the first place to start. And sometimes it can seem like a lot to bite off, but it is a good opportunity to get started as soon as you can. In early childhood education, you probably hear rumblings that we would love in the future to be much more well respected and recognized as a profession. And so that does mean usually that there are higher qualifications that come along with it. So it's something that I always encourage, that if you just start, sometimes that momentum can really keep you going, and you can complete a degree before you know it. So if you're ever interested in looking for more information, visit our website at rasmussen.edu, where you'll see all the information about our ECE degrees, as well as degrees in other parts or other schools, such as nursing and health sciences, business, design, technology, and many programs within those. So if you are interested, like I said, visit our website for some great information, and you can connect with an admissions advisor at that time as well, who can help you talk through your transcripts and all of that. And yes, Carol, Rasmussen is accredited through the Higher Learning Commission. We're called regionally accredited, which is starting to become a trend with state requirements, where states are asking for the colleges and universities to be regionally accredited. So that's something that we've held for a very long time, and just completed our revalidation process, or re-verification process, I can't remember what they call it, just this past year, which was interesting through COVID, as everything is interesting through COVID. So Carol, we can definitely connect afterwards if you'd like. But you can also come and join us at one of our information sessions. So these are just beginnings. We just started doing these in June officially. And our next ones are August 17th, so next Tuesday, and then the following week on Wednesday evening. If you go to rasmussen.edu/education, you'll see some information where you can sign up to get the link to attend live, where we give you tons of information and give you a chance to ask tons of questions. And most of the time we have admissions advisors on the call as well. I think there's a couple where they might not be, but we encourage you to come so that you can get some information and make a really educated decision for yourself. There's lots of amazing early childhood education college programs and degree programs out there, and not one is the same. They're all different. And so, you know, while I would love for all of you to come to Rasmussen to get your next degree, I know it may not be the right program for you. So I really want you to educate yourself on different programs that are available to you, and how you can learn more about them. So navigating our WebEx room, this is our WebEx space. You have been muted to avoid background noise, because I'm assuming you're all at home or somewhere comfortable where dogs might bark, doorbells might ring, children might scream or cry, or ask interesting questions, and we want to make sure we're trying to be focused on the session tonight. We do recommend you use your computer speakers and your microphone, although you can switch audio between the two. So if your computer starts to give you troubles, you can switch to phone. Just go to the upper left corner of the page, and you'll be able to switch your audio at any point. If it is really tricky and you end up having to leave the space, you can come back in during the session. So I have not closed it off because of that. I want you to be able to get back in if you accidentally get kicked out, or if you need to leave to reset your system and come back in. And any questions or comments, we really encourage you to put those in the chat box. And that way, you know, you can get your questions answered by myself or by one of our participants here in the group, or you can, we can talk about it at the end of the session, or you can just share your experiences. It's really great to see that we all seem to have similar experiences, but then occasionally there's unique ones that really help us learn and grow. So participate away. I would love to have it. Now, we do offer an in-service credit, and it's really an in-service hour, a training hour, a professional development hour. Um, it's kind of, depending on where you live, it's called different things. And you do receive a certificate of participation for attending this session live tonight. You do need to participate for the entire session to receive the certificate. And they are sent to you by email, and they will go to the email that you originally registered. So if you registered under someone else's email, it'll go there because that's what we have on file. But do note that it sometimes gets stuck in your spam or your junk folder, or even in a folder that you kind of get alerted to because they're afraid that it's some kind of junk mail or something. The way we do it, we try really hard not to have that happen, but some systems are very secure and they don't allow things in that they don't know. So if by chance you don't receive your email with the certificate linked within 48 business hours of the session, give me an email and I'd be glad to look into that for you. But do definitely check all of the possible places it could have gotten sent to just in case it did get sent there. So welcome to me. I am your presenter again this evening. I am really excited to be able to talk about classroom things and early childhood education group activities. I am not currently in a group child care setting or working with children directly. So getting a chance again to go back to my experiences, go back to what I know and I love, and going back to thinking about being with children on a daily basis is wonderful for me. So I'm super excited to be here and have a chance to get to know you. And I know Crystal, small world, Crystal. It's great to see you on this call. I used to work with her many moons ago. And it's great to see you. I occasionally see a couple people from that program on these calls, so it's really great. So let's switch over to the ECE webinar series, the actual webinar, Block Play, Math and Engineering in Action. How boring did you think this was going to be, right? Talking about math and engineering, you're thinking, oh gosh, those aren't my favorite subjects. And for mostly people in this field, we're often called creatives or nurturers, those people that maybe math and engineering are not our favorite things, although I do know several people who have those categories as their favorite things. But typically, we're often not seen as the math and engineering experts in education. But really, we are. And I'm going to share with you tonight some information about block play. And you might be thinking, I think I know block play. And you probably do. But it's one of those things that you probably learned about a long time ago. And it's one of those things you don't talk about very often. We don't often have trainings on block play. We don't often have webinars on block play or opportunities to get together and play with blocks. So this is an opportunity to talk about it. And if we could be in person, which I would love to be in person, I would love to play with blocks with you while you are doing this session, because I think blocks are the best activity you can do with your children, regardless of age, period. They are one of my all-time favorites. And what I have noticed is a lack of block play in early childhood programs. And so I'm hoping that even though you think you might know block play and you might know even everything that I'm sharing today, I want to challenge you to leave this session and decide how you are going to create an engaging invitation to block play. If you're in a group setting, starting tomorrow. If you're in that family child care, where are my blocks? Get them out. Make sure that those blocks are available to your children in an inviting and engaging manner. So our competencies today include that, to create an engaging invitation to block play, because it is such a great activity for every child to participate in. Describe the importance of blocks with children's play. I mean, hey, some parents don't know that children's playing with blocks is an educational activity. It's seen often as just play, fun. Oh, it's great. Stack up the tower, knock it down. Stack up the tower, knock it down. You could do that for an hour with a toddler. Most parents don't see the learning that can happen with that. So we have to be able to explain it to them. And then also explain how block play supports development in mathematical, engineering, and science concepts specifically. So what I want to ask you is this. When was the last time you played with blocks? When was the last time you played with blocks? Awesome. So a couple today, yesterday, today. This is good. This is good. With your 8-month-old, love to see the babies with blocks. 1 year ago, Christina, that's too long. Fantastic. That's a good sign. That means we've got a really good group of instructors here with the children that are ready and willing to get down and dirty and play with blocks. Now, let me ask you another question. How many, or let me ask it this way. How many children can play in your block area? Okay. Okay, so yeah, pretend COVID doesn't exist. If you had blocks, oh my gosh, Heather, you don't have blocks. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I kind of want to pretend COVID doesn't exist, don't you? For 1 hour, let's pretend COVID doesn't exist. Different areas with blocks. Okay. Heather, oh my goodness, we're going to have to give you ammunition to protest and get blocks. All of them, Anna. Wow, that's crazy. How much the space allows. Yeah, you're right, Lorraine. All righty then. So here's another question for you. How many of you, yes or no, have wooden unit blocks in your group? Oh, there's lots of yeses. That's a positive for me. And do they look like the ones in the picture? Not right now, Arlene, yeah. Lots of yeses. And I am so thrilled to see that, or to hear, that you have wooden unit blocks in your learning space with your children. For a while, I was visiting programs for observations and noticing that, and this was pre-COVID, so like I said, I'm pretending COVID doesn't exist, right? Because there's all kinds of weird regulations with COVID, and some of them make sense and some of them aren't quite making sense anymore. But what I noticed was that these wooden unit blocks were not in the classroom. We're not with the groups of children. And that the main thing said, and let's see if you can tell me why we would not, or why a group would not have wooden unit blocks. Why do you think they would not have wooden unit blocks? Well, infants for safety, yeah, infants, and they probably couldn't pick them up or hold them. Dangerous, yep, Heather? In the outdoor learning center, yes, and cost, Wendy, they are and can be quite expensive, although they last a really long time, so they are an investment. But hitting and throwing, look at that, hitting and throwing. We'll talk about that a little bit because that's a barrier for some, but it is not a barrier that can't be overcome, period, and shouldn't be overcome. It is our role, and we could talk about this in a challenging behaviors session. It is our role as educators and supporters of these children learning to teach them how to interact with the unit blocks. So that is definitely something. They do take up some space, absolutely, and you know, and they. Depending on the number of them, you have to have quite a few of them, depending on how many children you have. Towers falling on other kids, there's ways to work with that as well. So my big thought here as we go into talking about blocks is that block play is so beneficial to children in many, many ways, and we're going to talk about those now, that there's no excuse for not having blocks in your program with the children. Everything can be overcome. Yes, they cost money, absolutely. Good wooden blocks like these do cost money, but look how beat up this picture is with these blocks. I mean, there's paint on some of them. Some of them they're different colors because they've probably been sanitized 5 million times. Some of them are brand new, you can tell. Others are quite worn. There's nothing that can be overcome. There's ways to get grants, there's ways to save, there's ways to get donations to be able to purchase blocks because they last. If you buy good ones, like these wooden union blocks, they last forever. There's also no reason why we can't work through children not throwing blocks or children throwing blocks or towers being too tall. There's always ways to work through all of the negatives or the disputes, and the benefits are so immense that it is far worth it. So block play itself is also one of the easiest things that children can participate in, and even though it may sometimes feel like there's blocks everywhere, it's also one of the easiest things to clean up. It's one of the easiest things to not be dirty, and so it's a great activity all around. So why is it not flipping to the next slide? There we go. So let's learn a little bit about the history of blocks. So two different folks, this is very brief history, two different folks are credited with the creation of blocks. And one of them is Frederick Froebel. He is the father of kindergarten. And he created, and those of you in Montessori can probably tell this far better than I, but he really created the Froebel blocks. And he was one of the first ones to create wooden unit blocks, similar to the ones you see here, for the children to interact with, involving mathematics, spatial awareness, and that sort of thing. It was in 1913 when Caroline Pratt created the first wooden unit blocks, and similar to the ones that we have here, for kids to be able to use and build with. So it's not, even though blocks themselves and things that are similar to blocks have been around for probably eons, right? You can stack and build with anything. The wooden blocks itself have only been around for a pretty short time, historically wise. The use of blocks really functions as a comprehensive learning tool. It allows children to develop and play in a very natural and realistic fashion. And we'll talk more about the specifics, but you can see here that it really hits onto different domains of development. Children can learn cognitive skills when addressing block play. What do you think some cognitive skills children can learn in addressing block play? Let's see what you're thinking of already. Yep. Yeah, basically the math and the science and the engineering activities that we'll talk about in a few minutes. So yeah, and that includes those. Language development and communication, because typically children don't play with blocks in a vacuum. They usually play with blocks either next to or with other children, especially in a group child care setting or group preschool setting. And so they learn to talk to one another. They negotiate. They discuss how something's going to be built or why it works or doesn't work. And it's very natural conversation because it's something that's not directed by an adult. It's all directed by the children. It's also good for health and physical development, especially involving large motor and fine motor skills, depending on the size of the blocks. And I'll show you a couple of my favorite ones in a moment. But they can really help with both areas of physical development. And then emotional and social development. Children can create things that represent areas, places, objects that are special to them, that can be important in their past or in an experience they've had, or maybe they could build their own home. They can also do dramatic play with blocks, which means that they're interacting and acting out what they see around them, which really promotes their social and emotional development. And it can also show you how children approach learning. Okay, their learning preferences, how they ask questions, how they problem solve, all of that can show up in block play. Basically, if you allow a good block play session to really get going, you can learn a lot about the child you're observing just by watching them build and interact with others in the block area. Now, there are different stages of block play, and there's a few different types of them out there. This one, to me, is the most logical and the one you can really see in their play. And yes, Chanel, using a cell phone. That's a really common one for children to use blocks in dramatic play. So blocks can be carried. We see that with our little ones, with our infants and toddlers. As soon as they can put something in something else, they are carrying blocks, whether they're the small little alphabet blocks, whether they are larger blocks, cardboard blocks, or even fabric blocks. They are putting them in other things and carrying them around, or just carrying them around because they're able to pick them up and hold on to them. Stacking. We start to see stacking in the toddler age group, and it really varies. We sometimes see stacking a little bit earlier, and we'll get to those in a second, Arlene, and sometimes we'll see it a little bit later, and stacking progresses from small short stacks to large towers, depending upon the child's developmental age. Then there's bridge building, creating things that span space, or ramps I like to include in this area too, where kids are starting to build structures that have 3 blocks, 2 on each side, 1 in the middle, spanning an open space. Then you start to see enclosures. It's when kids start building things that look like farms, or they have a house where they've enclosed the whole space in a big rectangle or square. And then you start to see patterns. And patterns and symmetry really don't happen until they're in their later middle to late preschool years, where they start to be able to maybe build that house using only yellow and blue blocks if they have colored blocks, or they're only using certain colors of Legos because they're putting them in a special pattern, or creating things that look the same side to side. Structures, early representation. This is when they're starting to build things that look like something that they know, or represent something that they know. They might build a house and it looks something like their house potentially, or it looks like the gas station, or it looks like the firehouse or a fire truck, or they're building their school. They'll build things that are familiar. And then the advanced representation really happens in the late preschool, sometimes earlier, but late preschool into early school age, where kids are representing something that is completely their own or highly influenced by their own. So they might build a house, but it's not going to be as simple of a house as maybe they live in. Maybe it's a house and it has a swimming pool and it has a basketball court and it has a horseback riding space, all of this inside one big house, right? So they start building things that are a little bit bigger and more elaborate as they go. Yes, Rebecca, that is the good part, when they start branching out with their block play into other spaces or bringing stuff in from other spaces. So let's look a little bit at different types of block play. So blocks is a pretty wide term, okay? The most beneficial block set are the wooden unit blocks. These are the primary blocks that are seen in most early childhood education programs, or should be seen in most early childhood education programs. And hopefully with the wide variety of shapes, so that children are seeing how shapes create other shapes, and hopefully they do have cylinders, and hopefully they do have larger ramp ideas, so that their structures can become more elaborate, intricate, and more detailed. Yes. Oh, it is so cool when kids can build something that is completely from their mind. Magda, I love that. Whoops, always wants to do that. My mouse does not like it. So small tabletop building blocks, and this is just an example. They look like the larger wooden unit blocks, but they're smaller, and typically they work really well on a tabletop because they are smaller. They are also lighter, so they don't necessarily build as tall or as stay as stable as the wooden unit blocks that I showed you a moment ago. So they're usually typically for smaller, more manipulative type things. Now keep in mind, someone said before that Legos are often considered manipulative. Blocks are blocks. Sometimes they fall into the block category and sometimes they fall into a manipulative category. It depends. That's why I recommend that every program that works with children, probably from the age of like 1.5 years and up, has the wooden unit blocks that I mentioned earlier, because those are buildable things. They can build all kinds of structures with these wooden unit blocks that they can't do with Legos, or that allow you to have both the blocks and the Legos in 2 different areas. Yeah, it depends on the size. Yes, and they can create patterns with these colored blocks too, that it makes it a little bit different when they're all the same color. That they can create patterns with the unit blocks too. It's just going to be basically built on shapes or size. Oh my goodness, it keeps doing that. Then there's wooden hollow blocks. Does anyone here have the wooden hollow blocks in their stack, in their program? Foam and cardboard blocks for toddlers, yes, in our playroom. These are probably my favorite types of blocks that I have ever been privileged to use. When I was in college, the preschool program I worked with used wooden hollow blocks. Yes, they did have the small wooden unit blocks as well, but they had these wooden hollow blocks inside their room, not outside, inside their room, their regular room. They did count as a large motor activity because they're big and they're heavy, and can be heavy, but they can create life-size structures. They do take a lot of space, but what they did, which I thought was brilliant, and I wish I had a picture of it, but you know, that was a long time ago. We didn't have digital photos then, and so I don't know where they are, but I can tell you that they use these hollow blocks for their dramatic play. They did not have a traditional kitchen set, because according to the licensing regulations, they didn't need the kitchen set. They just needed to have the materials for enough children to be able to have dramatic play activities in their dramatic play area. So these wooden hollow blocks became a drugstore, or like a CVS, Walgreens type of a drugstore counter. They became the kitchen set when they were ready for that. They were a restaurant with where you have the hostess at the beginning. They did that. They became a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle sewer at one point. They were brilliant because there was no stopping where the children could take these unit blocks. It was amazing. They combined it then with all of the different props and dress-up clothes and all that stuff that you would have in dramatic play, and they even brought in the wooden unit blocks to be food, to be things that they would purchase at the CVS. I think it was a Walgreens back then, and beds for babies. Yes, it was wonderful. So instead of spending the money on something that was very limited in what the children could do with it, meaning that kitchen set that everybody has, right, the refrigerator, the stove, and the cabinet, they had these instead. And I thought, what a great tool for children. And they used them and moved them around all the time. And boy, they were large motor material, that's for sure. Then there's interlocking building blocks. And yes, Legos are considered blocks. They are a manipulative type block because they're smaller typically. For younger children, the Duplos or the Duplo size blocks are more appropriate, obviously, for choking hazards and their ability to hold small objects. So it can be either. But the interlocking blocks are different than unit blocks. Unit blocks don't stick together when you stick them together, right? So a tower is going to be more likely to fall. So children will have to experience what it means to balance something on top of something else. Whereas Legos, being you stick them together, they stay together. So they do promote a lot of imagination and a lot of small motor skills and that sort of thing, but they are a different set of skills than the unit blocks. So if your program has only interlocking blocks for the children, regardless of size, it's important to branch out to blocks that have to be balanced so that children can learn how to do that with their motor skills. And connects, yes, connects are similar. They're interlocking blocks as well. Similar to Lincoln logs are interlocking blocks too. But, you know, connects really hits more in that manipulative just because of shapes. There's cardboard building blocks, and these are similar to the hollow blocks, but they, you know, have a shorter shelf life because they're cardboard. They do get stood on, they get sat on, they get squished, they get beaten up and can get beaten up pretty well. So sometimes programs will purchase these multiple times. I always say look at the cost effectiveness. Potentially there's the opportunity to get a set of wooden hollow blocks that are going to last you a lot longer, maybe more safe because they're sturdy. Cardboard blocks aren't really meant for standing on or for building large things because they are so light. They do like to fall over. So weigh the benefits, right? And I always say shoot for and ask for the best and see what you can find out. Milk carton blocks are great too, and that's what Wendy said in the chat, and those can be made out of milk cartons, you know, the regular old-fashioned milk cartons, but they do have a shorter shelf life. So they, you know, work great for younger kids where you are worried about things falling, but they are lighter, so they also don't stay stacked quite as easily as the heavier blocks do. So keep in mind that every block that you deal with, foam blocks too, Elizabeth, are lighter. So there's a different set of skills, a different set of movement that's required to stack foam blocks, which are very easy to stack, right, compared to unit blocks or wooden blocks that are heavier, sturdier, but yet may not quite stack as easy. Then there's the boutique building blocks, and I like to think of these as like the specialty blocks. That's why I call them boutique blocks. There's two on the left. You see the two kids playing with the small slats, where they're thin little planks that you can make all kinds of stuff with. School agers really like these because they can get super detailed, as you can see here. There's also the rainbow blocks here, which are beautiful when you're in a room with lots of natural light, that can be stacked, but they're kind of limited as to how they can be stacked. They do work fabulously, actually all three of these sets, integrated with other blocks so that they can be the extra blocks in the set. They can be the ones that add the flavor, the style, the originality to what children are creating with the regular unit blocks. Absolutely, Magda, with other ones. And then there's these here, and I forgot what they're called, but they look like, you know, little wood chips, little log chips, which you can certainly make if you know somebody who is into wood cutting. But these are all well sanded and they're small, but they do make really interesting creations, especially when you're mixing them with those unit blocks. Tree cookies, thank you. They're just small tree cookies. Then the other thing that really makes block play special, and I can't not include loose parts and props. So a block space needs to have a place that children can embellish what they're creating. If you just give children wooden unit blocks, they will make amazing things. But what really keeps the children engaged is when you add farm animals to the wooden block area, or you add different kinds of blocks that are maybe those little planks or the wooden cookies, or you add the colorful rainbow blocks, or you add little people, wooden people or dollhouse people to the play space. Dinosaurs, like you see in the back of the picture on the right, they've created something for the dinosaurs, and you can see all of those blocks intermingled together in that space with those three kids playing together. Counting bears work great in the block area as well, and there's usually a lot of them, so they work in a nice big group. And then you see over here on the other picture, these two young children are using things that are non-traditional. So these are the loose part things. These are popsicle sticks, toilet paper rolls or paper towel rolls cut in smaller pieces. There's a little cups with lids and all kinds of other stuff that can be stacked and built upon or added to block areas for children to play in. So all of these are different types of materials to use in block play. We make zoos. Yeah, kids will make zoos all the time, especially in the summer. Once they go to the zoo, they are always making zoos. Open-ended play through blocks and building allow children to explore ideas, take risks, socialize, and learn STEM concepts naturally. So STEM is really an acronym that really describes much of what an early childhood educator does all day long anyway. However, we needed to make sure that people outside of a good early childhood group setting realized that we were still teaching and children were still learning, even though they were doing it all through play. Yep, and that's really important, is having a variety of blocks. And like I said, when I saw these classrooms and these group settings without blocks or with only Legos, because that was easy to find, or Lego type blocks, and that was easy to store and kids really liked it, great, but we do need to find those types of building blocks and activities that children will be challenged in both their physical play, they will be challenged in their creativity, they'll be able to make things that they see in their environment and represent what they see. So it's really important to have that variety and that quantity so that you have enough for a group of kids to play. And I'll show you some things in a minute that are really cool. So when you think about unit blocks and math, this is probably an obvious one for you all, is that children can learn mathematical concepts while they are playing with unit blocks. Okay, and look at this. This is a toddler at the bottom. She looks like a child roughly around the age of 2, maybe 3, building with unit blocks. And yes, you know what? Those blocks are a little bit higher than her head, which some of you might be like, oh my gosh, that's dangerous. Keep in mind, children will build as far and high as they can go. If they have an adult nearby that's there looking out for them, that can support them, that can encourage them to start another building perhaps, or to pay attention to height so that they are paying attention to their friends, they do generally learn to keep things appropriate unless they have an adult there to help them. I remember working with or visiting a program where they had blocks going to the ceiling. And they had a teacher there working with the children, and they had children standing on chairs. I know you're probably thinking, oh my gosh, you know, if you're a center director or you own a program, you're probably having a heart attack. They were standing on chairs to be able to reach to the higher level. They even got to the point where that was going to be too tall, so they had the teachers putting blocks up there. They wanted to see how high it could go before it fell down. It was great. The kids were estimating, I think it'll take 2 more blocks, maybe it'll take 3. These were preschoolers, boys and girls, talking about, well, what if you use this type of block instead of this type of block? They used every block that they had. So they had these unit blocks. They used every one that they had to create this amazing tower. It got almost to the ceiling of their classroom, which was not a high ceiling. It was in an old church building. It was not a high ceiling, but it was pretty impressive to see their work. But you can see with these blocks how you're learning units of measurement. You're talking about things in space. So you can see the arch and the half circle. Those come together to make a rectangle. You can see the double and the unit and the half unit blocks. So children can be learning without even realizing that they're learning math concepts that will help take them to geometry and will help take them to algebra later in life. I know you're thinking, oh my gosh, not yet. But really what children are learning is how these all connect and relate to one another. Oh, goodness gracious. So let's talk some science concepts. So this structure here, what is your first impression of this structure? Yeah, cool. Yeah, it does. Like flying cars, right? Very detailed, yes. The freeway. Scary as that sounds, you're right. Gravity and weight because it's up. Yes, a bridge, roads. This was created by adults at a conference. This was at a NACE National Conference. For those of you, if any of you have been to a NACE National Conference, you might recognize that this is a booth by Community Playthings. You can see the representatives from Community Playthings in the back. And they are huge proponents of block play. And they do have amazing articles and blogs on their website, by the way, that will help promote block play. If you are looking to have words and support for your leaders or for your families. They did have fun making this, I asked, because it looks pretty fun. There's little people on there and everything. And what block play can give children is they can give children the opportunity for scientific research. How many blocks can I put on here before it falls down? I want to create a bridge, so how am I going to create the bridge? Well, I could do this and this. Will that support this and this? They can ask questions. They're actually learning how to do the scientific process by creating with blocks. Naturally, they're not waiting to see if the volcano explodes and what's going to happen. They're doing it as they go. The key to it is having teachers and educators and adults to be able to talk to about what they're creating so that we, as the adults, can share with them terminology, vocabulary, descriptions, asking the questions, getting them to ask the questions, that where they're helping to facilitate the science and the concepts that we eventually want them to learn. So it's something that's very simple, but yet can have really big results. So engineering. So this one right here is this little boy is using some PVC pipes that have been cut in half, so there are really some junk materials going on here, as well as a few blocks interspersed throughout. And he has created some ramps. The brilliance with blocks is that blocks you can almost create anything with blocks. Has anyone been to the Lego store or the Lego store in the Mall of America, for those of you here in the Twin Cities? If you're down in Florida or out in LA, I think there's some Lego stores where they've created those amazing things all out of Legos. Like, they're mind-boggling. In Boston, yep. They are just mind-boggling to see the detail and everything. A lot can be created out of blocks. And children can, just like this picture with the science, this one here, they can create things that allow them to explore things like spatial relations, concepts such as, in this one, is speed and velocity. So if I move the ramp a little bit taller, like the one here behind him, that one's probably going to go a little bit faster, but is it going to go farther, or is it going to be stunted because it's so, so steep? Well, the one at the bottom allow the car to go farther because it's not quite as steep, and so it'll go faster and farther. So you can talk about all these concepts regarding engineering or in creating buildings and architecture and things like that, that allow children to do it without realizing that they're really learning anything. They're enjoying the process, which is always the important one, and the important part, I should say. Oh, this is driving me crazy. There we go. So requirements from block building, this is where all of our barriers lie when it comes to building with blocks. One is we need enough space. And I'm going to show you pictures here in a second of some block building spaces, and there's even more that you can find online that are outstanding block building spaces. But you need space to build with blocks. If you have just a really small space that is kind of created in a corner or doesn't have enough for several children to be able to build a large structure together, you're missing the point of being able to use blocks. because blocks should be something that children can build, especially using unit blocks or larger blocks, that they can build larger structures, more elaborate, especially for preschoolers who are really getting to that point in their development where they're going to be representing things that are in their head versus just stacking blocks, you know, going up from the ground. The location of block play. Block play is sometimes, in observations that I've had, is that it's sometimes in a corner. Sometimes it's out in the middle, typically in the area that children and educators use for group time. Because it's usually where the carpet is, and so that's where the blocks are, which then becomes a challenge because the blocks are available during group time. Or you have to take elaborate actions to cover them up or close up the cabinets during group time because the children want to play with the blocks that are there. I encourage block time or block building to be near dramatic play. An opportunity for kids to be able to combine the two so that they can use blocks for cell phones and they can create structures in the block play area using the babies from the dramatic play space or the dollhouse people that you have there. They can build a school for the dollhouse people or a mansion for the dollhouse people in the block play area. And not have to carry things clear across the room to be able to use them. They're right there, they're accessible and easy. It encourages imagination, absolutely. I also think materials are important. A variety of blocks is really critical. And while some programs have quality rating systems that encourage multiple sets of blocks and enough blocks for children to be able to use, sometimes we still get really locked into, well, I have a bucket of blocks, everything's good. Or it's so hard to get the kids to put away the blocks, so I'm not going to have a lot of blocks out because it's just too hard to put it away. We have to still remember that blocks are a natural activity for young children. Building is in their DNA. And if we don't let them build with blocks, they'll find other things to build with instead. So I encourage, which it sometimes can be good, but we do want them to be able to experience block play. So really think of the materials that you can have there for them. And then the enrichment materials. So those loose parts that can add to the block building experience. The other materials such as props, so those animals, those people. I remember a program that I worked with once that took in a toddler 2-year-old room, they took the wooden unit blocks and they put on the wooden unit blocks, they fixed a picture of each child on the wooden unit blocks so the children could play with blocks that looked like them. So I had a picture of them, and some of the times they put family members on other blocks so that they could be building a house, and then all the blocks would be there and it would look like they had them built for their family. So instead of having a ton of little people, they had these blocks instead. I've seen them create, you know, and it looks like a house on the, or looks like a bank on the outside of the block, a picture of one for them if they're building and using cars and roads and things like that. So get creative, think out of the box. Literally, boxes are a fantastic material to use for building. And I remember seeing, you might have seen it online a couple years ago, where one of the teachers had taken out all the toys from his classroom, his preschool room, and filled up the shelves with different sizes of boxes. And let the children play with boxes, and they loved it. They created and built things that were out of this world. So it doesn't have to cost you a fortune to build with blocks or to have building blocks, although I still think every classroom and every group should have wooden unit blocks. But time is probably our biggest enemy. We could definitely say space might be a big enemy, that some programs are just crowded between having enough space for all the children. And this is not even thinking of COVID, right? This is just thinking normal, when we didn't have to worry about how many kids were in a space and all of that kind of thing. You know, because of health reasons, that is. Time is still probably our biggest barrier. Block building takes time. And children don't want to put away what they've just taken time to build and create, especially if they are building and creating with other people. because they've really taken the effort. They've talked it out. They've discussed it. They've decided. They've made choices. They've problem solved. They know how they want this to look. And suddenly time's up, time to go outside. We have to clean up, put everything away. Finding the time for children to build with blocks is probably your biggest battle. So I encourage you to have open block time where there's a chance for them to build for a longer period of time. There's time for them to put those elaborate structures together, especially the older the children are. Additionally, if you have a way to let them save what they've built, whether it's a smaller Lego thing, whether it's a small stack of blocks that they've created and spent time with on the table, or whether they have built it on the carpet, is there a way they can save it? Now, you can definitely take pictures, but it's not the same because they may not be done yet, right? So maybe they're in the middle of it, but they're not done yet, and they want to finish it, right? Or they want the opportunity to finish it, right? So it may not be that they maybe are done, but they want an opportunity to come back and visit it. And leaving the structure, if you can, all day is great. Putting signs on it. I've seen programs take signs that the kids have created that said "save please," that they have laminated and they put on the structure so that the structure can stay for a while. I've seen programs save it overnight. And yes, I know there's cleaning companies that come and vacuum and all that kind of stuff and put chairs up and everything, but they find a way for it to stay. In work zone, absolutely, and label it, yes. That alone is so rewarding for children, especially if they've really spent the time putting it together. You would hate it if you spent a whole bunch of time creating this big craft project, and then someone said right in the middle of when you're creating it, because you've lost all track of time, that it's now time to go outside and you have to clean everything up and you have to put everything away. But you're not quite done yet. Or you need time to think about being done, and you don't have that time right now because it's time to clean up. Even if you got a warning, you kind of block that out because you were so involved. So I encourage you to find a way to look at these 4 items and make sure you have enough of each one for the kids in your program for their block building play. Some reminders for facilitating and supporting block play. It's really important to plan ahead for block play. And so many times I see programs that just have blocks on shelves. There isn't anything there to invite them, to encourage them, to say, hey, come play with me. Isn't this cool stuff? And we need to do that. So we need to set the stage for open-ended play. Looking back at these 4 things, space, location, materials, and time, make sure you have those figured out. And then observe and listen. Observing in the block area is so interesting. You will learn so much about the children in your group by listening and watching them in the block area. You'll see their confidence level, their level of independence, their thinking strategies. You will really see who these children are in the block play area. Ask them open-ended questions. How did you create that? How did you decide to do that? Or tell me questions. I know it's not a question, but tell me things. Expand on their comments and ideas. So perhaps they're thinking of something and they're like, how can I do this? And you're hearing them ask that question. You can ask them questions to get them thinking more. Or perhaps you can say, you know, I have an idea, and you can bring over something that they can maybe add to their block play that they didn't know existed or didn't think of. Incorporate specific spatial, math, and science vocabulary and concepts. One of the easiest things to do when you have the little ones, the toddlers and 2s, and you're stacking blocks, is counting the blocks with the children as they're stacking them. And then when they fall down, oh, all fall down. Let's stack them again. And then 1, 2, 3, and you count them as you stack them. Just that example, doing it with them, helps them understand one-to-one correspondence, helps them understand number order. You can also talk about the shapes as you're building with them, and then more advanced as you go through. Just plan on that kind of as you're interacting and observing the kids in play. Connect their play to real life. You know, what are they building? I remember this preschooler, he was 5, I think he was 5, he was almost 5 if he wasn't, and he had created, I should say this, he had been to a train station in another city. It was when I worked in Chicago. He'd been to a train station in another city. It was a large, one of those large train depots, right? Big, beautiful buildings. So he decided he needed to create a train depot. And so he was kind of the one in charge. We called him, ironically, the foreman. He was the one in charge, and he had a couple of friends that were building this with him. The structure was as tall as they were. It was as long or as wide as they would be laying down. It was massive, and it had ramps for the trains coming in and out of the station. It was amazing, and it was connected to his experience and what he saw at the train station. We brought in books about trains. We brought in photos, because we didn't have, it was before internet, was really prominent. We brought in photos and encyclopedias and books all about train stations. We talked about trains, what they wanted to know. It was a wonderful experience for him because we connected his experience to what he was building, and he connected it too. And then encourage cooperation and listening. Of course, that's probably a given, but really provide time to create. You will have less trouble getting them to put things away if you've given them enough time to play it out in their opportunities to do so. Oh, I keep doing that. So some enviable block building spaces that I found online. So these are just literally photos that I searched and got lost in regarding play spaces. You'll notice on the left the number of different props and loose parts that are available in baskets and boxes for children to build on. And you'll also see that in this picture they have a carpet on the floor, which is kind of bumpy. Not ideal for building on, right? Not ideal at all. You put something on it, it falls right over. So what they did was they have a big wooden board that the kids can build on that's sitting on top of the carpet. So that the carpet can still stay there, and when they're building in that area, the board comes out so that they can actually build on it and things won't all fall over before they even start. The section in the middle is so beautifully organized, I was quite impressed. One of the blessings of block building is putting them away. And I encourage you that if you have blocks, have them organized in a good way, using pictures and words to organize the space. Block building or block cleaning up is a natural sorting activity for you, and use it that way. I've seen programs where they just have a big bin and all the unit blocks get thrown in the bin. It's missing such an important sorting activity for the children where they can match up the sizes, the shapes, the pictures to the different shelving units. And then the one on the right is an actual, they call it their building zone or their construction zone. You can see the construction tape. They've actually made it into an inviting space, encouraging building and creation, including paint cans, paper, big, large cardboard tubes, all the different building blocks, some of the larger hollow blocks, some baskets and boxes to boot. Now, these building spaces can either give you the willies because it's like too much space and too open, or it can really spark your imagination. So the space to the top left is a little small. These guys are building pretty cool things using hollow blocks and unit blocks combined, as well as some other materials and baskets. But their space is kind of small, especially for the 3 kids building. They're really limited on what they can build and where they can build it because their space needs to be for all of them to be able to build together. And if they're not building the same thing together, if they're building parallel, meaning next to one another, then it's going to be even more limited for them. But if you look at the space underneath it, and you look at the space where this young lady has been building, and she has all kinds of characters and looks like dollhouse people involved, different types of unit blocks, that's a big building space. And if these 3 guys that were on top, in the picture on the top, were in the space on the bottom, they'd have a pretty enviable space to play. And they'd be able to get quite elaborate with the blocks that they would be using. So think about how space may influence the behavior of the children in your group too when they're in the block play area. And the top picture is just something, it's a little bit blurry, but it's definitely a beautiful block building space for children to participate in. It looks inviting, it looks comfortable, it's big enough, there's a lot of blocks, a lot of props, and it looks like you might want to really get involved in that space. So that is the end of our session. So thank you for joining me. So your older toddlers like to build robots. That's very cute. So as always, I try to inspire you, I hope, to taking this to a different level in your program. I encourage you to seek out websites that provide great examples of block play for young children. You can also find a lot of great inspiration by photos, by simple Google searches, looking for block play areas or block building spaces, and you'll find a million of them. One of my favorite sites is called Homegrown Friends. It's an art and building and creative space online, but there's a lot of them out there, and I encourage you to find them both on Pinterest, on YouTube, on Instagram, and keep that inspiration going day to day. The next training is in September, so that will be, I don't have the date memorized, I think that is September 9th. And that one is on dramatic play. So thinking a little bit differently about dramatic play because it is a natural tool for children to express themselves and improve their social emotional development. Oh, thank you, Sharon. Good to see you. There's so many people that I'm familiar with on this call. This is great. Thank you all. Oh, thanks, Carrie. When COVID's over, I'll have to come visit your program, Carrie. Thank you all so much. Please stay safe, stay healthy, everyone. We'll see you at the next one. As a thought, this fall we're going to be having some guest speakers. We're going to be talking about resilience as teachers. We've had a tough year. How can we be resilient? And those are some guest speakers from Bright Horizons. We also have some guest speakers from Pro Solutions coming to join us. Future training. So Michelle, you should get, oh, I know you too. This is cool. You should get an email with the next trainings, but I know the September one, there will be upcoming invites on Facebook and such. So if you follow Rasmussen School of Education on Facebook, you'll see those. That'll be coming up probably here shortly. And I think they've been adding the flyer to or giving you information about it in the email with the certificate. So I think you should get it there too. But now that when you attend one, you should be getting them in the mail when they go out. So the fall session the fall quarter won't be going out probably until the middle of September. And you should get an email with that information. So you should get it in different ways, I guess. And Monica, it really depends on your state for continuing hours. So it is an in-service hour or professional development hour or clock hour, but it depends on your state and how your state receives those. So these aren't pre-approved in any state, or I'd be pre-approving them in all 50 states and we wouldn't be able to have as many. Besides, most of the states require that they be 2 hours in length, and that's just a long time for you all to sit here in the evening after you've worked a really long day. So we've kept them at an hour and a half for some, just because of that awareness. So they might, I would take your certificate and check with your state training organization, because sometimes they'll have some that have, you can have so many that are pre-approved and so many that aren't pre-approved. Oh, Magda, you don't have Facebook. Oh my goodness. Monica, you'll get a certificate in an email within 48 business hours of this session. Oh, and I should share this again. I forgot. We will be putting this recording on the page that I just linked below to for the next 90 days. So you'll have a chance to re-listen to it if you would like, or share it with a colleague. But then after 90 days, we'll take them down, and then there'll be new ones kind of going up as we go through them. But you should get your certificate within 48 business hours to your email. All right. Do you remember the boys training that went to a boys? Yes, I do remember that. And as soon as I read boys training, his name popped into my head, and then I lost it by the end of the sentence. He still does them, or was still doing them. Oh my goodness. I cannot remember what his name was. Dan Hodgins. Oh, that's it. I think he was Dan Hodgins. I think. I'm not sure on the spelling, though, of his last name. I know at the time, I think he was like, I don't remember where he was from. If you're looking, just as an aside, on great stuff about risky play, which happens a lot when you're dealing with boys and trying to give them opportunities to take safe risks in their play, Rusty Keeler has some amazing stuff, especially about outdoor play. He's a really great guy. And he has some new books out. I think they're through Exchange Press. So you might want to check there. But I'm pretty sure the one you're talking about is Dan Hodgins. Yeah, there you go, Magda. Yep. I've seen him present several times. I know the first time I saw him present anywhere was with a high scope training many, many years ago, probably when I was in college. Or just after college in Michigan. So, but I think he's still doing it, I think. He was at a conference not long ago. Yeah, he was. He really was. He found his niche in talking about boys. And I think there's some good, I would check Red Leaf Press and Exchange Press, because there's a couple of new books out there, or not relatively new books out there about boys. And he might have written one of them, Magda, you're right. He might have. Carol, great. It would be wonderful to see you at one of the information sessions, and feel free to share that information session information with anybody. They are open to anyone who's interested, and we offer them twice a month. So if you miss the ones here in August, we'll be back in September for 2 more, and you can sign up in advance for whichever one fits your schedule best. And we do them kind of later in the evening, like about 8 o'clock Central Time. Just to give people a chance to get home. You know, if you're in early childhood education, if you work till 6 o'clock, you know, that's really a challenge to get home and get fed and get your family together if you have that and all of that. So, but we'd be happy to answer any questions as well in the meantime. Well, great. Well, thank you all so much, and hopefully we will see you soon at another training. And if you need anything in the meantime, just give me an email. Oh, thanks, Magda. Bye, everyone. Stay healthy, please. Stay safe, and we'll see you next month. Bye, everybody.